Alright, let's create a minimal express-based file system router framework. I've scaffolded a project with some basic dependencies and a very simple program that logs the arguments passed to it. Now, we will need a way to transpile our TypeScript code to JavaScript, and while there are a bunch of ways to do this, I'm going to go with TSApp. It might be overkill for a small demo, but I think you'd find it's really easy to use, especially on larger libraries. But keep in mind that the TypeScript compiler will work just as well here. Once we've added a build script and built our code, let's update our package entry file to point it to the transpile.js. This will make sure our library code gets resolved correctly when imported or when run through the CLI. To test our package before even publishing it, we'll use the very helpful npm link command, and this basically just creates a symlink to our package. And now, when we run Warwick, it simply executes the code from our entry file and logs the default arguments passed to it, that being the path to the node executable on my local machine and the path to our entry file. Ideally, we'd want to run our CLI with commands and options and have it do different things. Considering this is a very minimal app, it will make perfect sense to pass the arguments ourselves, but I think this is a good chance to utilize the commander library. Once installed, all we'd have to do is define the commands we want and the arguments or options to make available. With that, let's rebuild our package and test out the CLI. You can see that Commander does a whole lot more than just passing the arguments. It gives some automatic help commands with some pretty nice outputs, and accessing the options or flags in our code is very, very straightforward. Cool. Next, we'll build out the heart of our framework. Well, it's really a meta framework since it's built on Express. Once we have our base dependencies, let's add a new handler.ts file with some logic that will be used to start the server. And if you've worked with Express before, this should look very familiar. Let's bring that over to the action callback to make our dev command start an Express app. And since we're working with ESM, remember to add the .js file extension on the import here to make the error go away. And now, building and linking should start an Express app on the specified port. And you can tell that the process is persistent since it doesn't terminate immediately. Similar to Next.js, we can require that all routes be put in a specific directory, for our case named routes. And for a file to be recognized as an endpoint, it must also be named route.js or route.ts. The handlers here would simply be exporting async functions with the names being the HTTP method and the function itself being structured exactly the same as an Express callback. So with the example I have here, these two should map to the root endpoint and a /hello endpoint. But we still have another TypeScript problem. We want to allow the user to utilize TypeScript, and since we'll be importing these files later on, they need to be in JS at the time of importing. To achieve this, I'll install ESBuild alongside another package, Globy, whose use you'll see in just a second. Back in our handler, let's add some logic to handle TypeScript. We'll do this using the Globy package to see if there are any TS files present in the routes directory. And Globy is really just a very fast glob pattern checker here, and if it finds any matches, we'll invoke the build-sync method from ESBuild with some reasonable options and output all this in our very own .warwick directory, similar to how Next.js has a .next directory after starting the dev server. Finally, being sure that the user's routes are now available to be imported as JS, let's add the logic for mounting the routes and methods and tying them to the appropriate handlers. While this may sound complicated, it's actually very simple to achieve. Looping through each of the route.js files, we'll simply import the module, and if it has any exported functions with names matching these methods, we mount the method, route, and handler on our Express app. Notice that I'm using a dynamic import here since we're on ESM, and if you're on Windows like I am, you might also need to add this file prefix if you run into any errors. Now, if we rebuild and relink our package, then start the server, we'll notice a few things. The app does get started correctly, and a new .warwick directory is produced with the contents being our transpile source files. Finally, if I open up a new terminal and make a request using curl, you'll see that everything goes perfectly according to plan. Now, we've built a framework and we're ready for it to take over the world. But before that happens, we need to make it downloadable from NPM. You will need to create an access token on your NPM account, which I've already gone and done behind the scenes. Once you have this token, to use it when publishing, include it in a .npmrc in the same directory as your package.json. I'm not going to show mine here since it contains sensitive values, but if you're curious about the contents, just make sure it resembles what I'm showing here on this dummy file, with the registry and the token in this format. Then we'll proceed to publishing. But wait, there is more. If you're unlucky, like me, then your project name may already be taken, so you might need to change it, as I have, from Warwick to Warwicks. And if you've already published an initial version, remember to bump that as well. Otherwise, none of this will work. And with that, we can finally publish it. That will take a short while and be done in no time. Now, after recording this, I realized that we published all the files, even though some aren't needed, but there's an easy way that you can specify which files to be included in the package.json. The very last thing to do now is download and use our framework. I'll head over to a different project that I've scaffolded, and this time, I'll install Warwicks and the types from Express. Once that is done, we can add a dev script in our package.json, which will just be a call to Warwick's dev. And since we have no routes yet, let's go ahead and add some alongside our very first handler. Actually, let's just copy over the one from the example from earlier. Going back to the terminal, let's run npm dev. And if you run into this error, just make sure that you specify the module type as ESM, which I forgot to do here. Then rerun the command and the app should now be started successfully. Again, we can use curl to test out that this actually does work. And there we go, our very own file system router framework based on Express. Now, of course, this is all very simplified and there's tons of things we could add, so let me know if that's something you'd like to see. But that's all for now. Thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next one.